Hey there, creepy peeps, and welcome to another installment of Terrifying Television on Thursdays. Doesn't quite have a ring to it, but I'm gonna stick with it. So we'll just see how that name pans out there. The way the episodes of The Hunger are arranged on Screenbox is a little confusing, and I watched an episode thinking it was the second episode in season 1 when actually it's like the second or third to last episode of The Hunger. I'm just gonna go with it, and when I get to this space in the series, I will just watch the second episode. The great thing about this is, and luckily for me, The Hunger is an anthology series, like I mentioned in the... Did I mention it in the previous episode? Or I mentioned it on my review on my website, that this is an anthology series, so it doesn't matter that I watched it out of order, I don't think. The second episode of The Hunger is entitled Clairemont, and it is a story based on a old French story called... It was called L'Amoureuse Mort. If I took French in high school, like that was like 4 years ago now, so hopefully I pronounced that correctly. But it's like the love death, which I took as like the dead lover or something like that, which makes sense for the episode, which is about a newly ordained priest who is tempted and seduced by this witch, I guess. They call her a witch in the episode, but she kind of acts like a succubus, I guess. She comes to him in his dreams. And, there's this kind of like war within himself between being devoted to Clairemont or being devoted to the church. I did have a much easier time following the story and understanding what the story was about as opposed to the first episode, which, if you remember my review, I absolutely didn't understand it, at least in the video form. And I do think I figured it out as I was writing out my thoughts. It kind of started to make sense in my head. Eventually, through the episode, an older priest, kind of like his mentor, kind of like our protagonist's mentor, he basically... I got the feeling that he knew about Clairemont when he sent our protagonist to this particular church, because Clairemont was buried in the cemetery there. And it's kind of hinted that the previous priest of that parish hung himself, and I took that as it was because of Clairemont, because he was so distraught over himself loving Clairemont more than the church and stuff like that, so he hung himself. So the older priest is kind of a douche and sends this younger priest to this parish knowing about Clairemont, and I guess it was maybe some form of like test or something, test of his faith, I guess. So the older priest gets our protagonist to renounce his love for her, and when he renounces his love for her, she like turns to stone. Her body turns to stone, which is interesting. So I guess that then nullifies her effect over him, and he's very distraught over this. I wasn't expecting that. And then the very end of the episode, it cuts to our protagonist like 40 years later. He's much older, and he is now passing on the parish to another younger priest who says he chose that parish to test his faith. And then our protagonist is like, oh, this is a good place for that, as he stares out the window of the church to Clairemont's mausoleum. So you kind of get the feeling that he never stopped loving her, even though he learned what she was. I don't know. So now we're going to talk about the second episode of The Walking Dead, and where we left Rick in the pilot episode, was in a army tank surrounded by walkers. A character that we meet later on, Glenn, is communicating with Rick through the tank via like radio waves, blah blah blah. Don't ask me about technical things. And he helps Rick get out of the tank and into the shelter of this building that Glenn and a group of survivors are now stuck in because of Rick, because he drew all the walkers to his location. So the whole episode is basically Rick helping this group of people get out of Atlanta, or the city, because they have the rest of their group is out in like the countryside or like the mountains or something like that. So the whole episode is Rick helping them get out of this tough situation because basically he put them there. We meet a couple of characters. Merle Dixon, who is a real asshole, and Rick handcuffs him to this pipe because he's a racist dick, and is just, when we kind of meet him, he's like being out of control and very violent and yelling, and Rick subdues him, handcuffs him to a pipe, while the rest of the group figures out how to get out. We also get to see again the group of survivors, well, I guess the rest of the group, which is in the mountains. Included in this group, which Rick doesn't find out yet in this episode, is his wife Lori, son Carl, and his partner, or his former partner, I guess, when he was actually an officer, Shane, whom I hate. Basically, I very much hate Shane and Lori. As the second episode ends with Rick successfully getting the group out of the department store that they're stuck in, and it ends with them driving off into the distance to meet up with the rest of the survivors. Unfortunately, Merle is left chained to the pipe on the roof of the department store. I think they mentioned something about him having a brother back in the group in the mountains, so that's gonna suck having to tell him that they left his brother alive, just left him. So the last episode we're going to talk about is the second episode of iZOMBIE. If you remember from last week, I mentioned that our protagonist Liv is a zombie, but not in the sense that you would think. She's not mindless, raging zombie thing. She actually is kind of cognizant. She still craves brains, but she's able to pass off as a semi-normal human being. When Liv eats the brains of somebody, she gets flashes of their memories, in kind of like a premonition sort of way, like something that she'll see kind of triggers it because it's a memory for that person. And she'll also start to adopt traits of that person. She eats the brains of a murdered artist, so she starts to really enjoy painting, and she starts describing these things in, like flowery descriptive language. But I really enjoyed this episode. I like that we get to see more of how Liv is dealing with being a zombie, and we get to see more of her profile, I guess. Like, we get to see more of the zombies of this universe because it's different than the mindless zombies that we're used to. We also get to meet the zombie who is inadvertently the cause of Liv's zombieism, as he was dealing the drug that apparently causes this in people. So they have kind of a funny moment where they're asking each other about being a zombie, because obviously they're like the first people that they've met, or the first zombies that they've met. So they're asking each other about like raging out, or as Liv calls it, full-on zombie mode, where they get like super strength and stuff like that. They're They're basically superheroes. It's kind of awesome. Or Liv is basically a superhero, which is kind of cool. And Blaine kind of tries to proposition her to supply him brains from time to time from the morgue, and she reluctantly agrees to do it, but doesn't actually like hold up her end of the deal when she goes to meet Blaine with the brains, and she sees him talking with drug dealers in an alley. So she kind of gets angry and a little righteous and storms off and doesn't supply him with the brains. Kind of like this little, I kind of like how they took it as like kind of like a crime fighting sort of thing, how it's going to be like, it's like Bones or Castle or something like that, but with a zombie. So yeah, that was my thoughts. Those were my thoughts on the second episode of The Hunger, The Walking Dead, and iZombie. As always, I will leave like a little extended or slightly longer review on my website at NightmareMaven.com should you want to read that. And I do hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a thumbs up, I guess, and subscribe to this channel if you'd like to see more of my face and hear more of my voice. And until next time, stay strange. Bye.